Click on this. No? Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you all today?
Good.
Yeah, we're here. That is the first step. Because if we weren't here, then the rest, there's nothing else, right? And I do appreciate you being here. This morning and this afternoon, what we're going to do is we're going to go over the competencies for the PPR, which is a required examination that you must pass in order to get your certification to teach, right? Do you know what PPR stands for?
Pedagogy, professional responsibilities.
Very good. Pedagogy and professional responsibilities. So what's pedagogy?
Teaching.
Teaching, the art and science, I would say, of teaching, right? Tried and true methods, tried and true research into what works with students. And so that's pedagogy. And then professional responsibilities, what do you think that may entail? No idea. I don't know. I'm not a professional. Don't ask me.
All your trainings, your
There you go.
what it takes to be in the classroom.
Very good. Yeah, so it has to do with professional development and following laws, right? Your responsibility as a teacher to follow all laws from the state of Texas and the federal government in regards to, privacy issues, in regard to copying and using materials, etc., right? So yeah, it's very broad. You will be taking an assessment on your content area where they're going to see if you know enough material to teach it, right? It's very difficult to teach algebra if you don't know how to do math, right? But this goes a little bit further. This is about how we teach and about our responsibilities as professional educators, okay? With that being said, I would just like to say that we have 6 hours today to do this, and this session was originally designed for people who went through teaching blocks. So it really was more of a review rather than an overview. And the reason why I mention that is that we may come to some things, this is a preparation for the test, but we may come to some things that you've never heard of before, and that I might go over them too quickly, and if that happens, you stop me and you say, what does that mean, okay? So again, I just want to let you know that originally this was more of a review type thing for people who had been taking teaching or education courses for a couple of years, but it is more of an overview, okay? So let me just kind of talk about this first, what's here up on the board, and it might be difficult for you to see. I did see at least one person come and take a picture. I think I love this technology. I don't utilize it to the fullest, but I do love it that you can take pictures and take it home. But these may sound very simple, but I do want to go over them. The tips for passing the PPR. Number one, understand the test. And that's what we're going to look at today. This first bullet, it's the context of an ideal world, okay? And sometimes there's a misconception out there that I've heard some people say in the past, well, this is ideal, that's not how classes really are, and so it's not really real. Well, yeah, it is. The PPR deals with problems. The PPR isn't saying this is an ideal world and you're never going to have problems. They're saying there's a problem here, and then what is the ideal response? That's the thing. So in my experience, when I was a professor at the university and I was dealing with a lot of students, those people who had been in classrooms like as paraprofessionals, sometimes had more difficulty with this assessment just because they'd say, well, Mrs. Gonzalez would do this. She would stick the kid in the corner until he settled down, and then, the following day, he would come back into the class. And so I'll put that down as an answer because that's what I saw happen. No, we want to look at what is the ideal response to a problem. It's always going to be student-centered, student first. Student-centered, student first. And as I mentioned here, wrong generally answers. Anything that makes it easier on the teacher is wrong. This is all about the students. I know we're getting into this field to make a living, but I'm hoping we have a calling for this as well. It's not about us. It's about the students that we serve, right? And so when we formulate our responses or when we look at the possible answer choices, we always want to think, what is in the best interest of that child? What is in the best interest of those children who are having these difficulties? You should know the vocabulary. In your handouts, I have a list of vocabulary from the different domains for you to look over. If there is an opportunity today that you've been looking them over and you really don't know what some of those words mean, please feel free to ask. We will not be going over it as a class, but I also have some other terms up here that are buzzwords. And that doesn't mean that each time these words are in an answer that it's the correct answer, but if we at least have a feel for what these words mean, we'll be understanding the test a little bit better. Okay? We'll be looking at this today, but your answers should always take into account the age or the grade level of the student. What may be appropriate at 11th grade may not be appropriate at first grade for our students, right? So just as you're always reading the questions on the test, almost always, if not always, I hate to say always and forever and ever, but almost always, they're going to give you how old the child is or in which grade that child is. So understanding the test through these 4 bullets, very beneficial. The next thing is study. A-Step has come a long way in accumulating good study materials for you all to use. This is a study session. I think after today you can use this as a study guide as well. But generally what I have found is don't just look at it today, go through the motions, sign in, sign out, put it away, then go take the test. Do some studying in between. There are a lot of things online and also here at A-Step. The last thing I'm just going to mention is prepare for the test day. And that is a very individual thing. Some people need 8 hours sleep the night before. Some people need 4 hours sleep the night before. Some people need to test in the morning. Some people need to test in the afternoon. Everybody's a little bit different. However, one thing I would say is this. Please be prepared to dress in layers. Dress in layers the day of the test. Because you'll be going into generally a computer lab type setting. And in computer labs, the computers generate a lot of heat, so they keep the air on at a very low temperature. And some people go kind of dressed like this, and then they're cold by 45 minutes into the test, right? So I would suggest you dress in layers. Wear a shirt, wear a sweater, wear a jacket, something where you can put on and take off so that you're comfortable for that. Another thing that I've been told is that in some testing areas, it can get a little noisy because the computers are all going at different questions for different people, and some people are responding verbally to the questions and things like that. I had never really experienced that, but be prepared that if noise bothers you, maybe take some cotton balls or something, earplugs or something into the test site, okay? I also believe that you're able to take some food in some places. Some places I don't think they allow it, in some places they do. So if you need to snack on something, you might want to take it with you and ask the test administrator that day, am I able to eat during the test?
I have a question. What's on the board, is that in like the sheet? Or
No.
That's just separate?
This is separate information.
Okay, thanks.
So yeah, you do have a list of vocabulary by domain. You'll have domain 1, domain 2, domain 3, etc. And then general vocabulary, which is really putting them all together. Some of these words may overlap, but what I'm finding is that these are buzzwords that they're now saying these are really the crucial ideas that you need to know, that these words will come out. These are the very positive ones. The ones, what color is this, by the way? Yeah, kind of like lavenderish purple or something. Those terms are what we would call the positive terms. So you'll see them in the questions themselves. And if you see them in the answers, generally those are pretty good things in the answers. These, if you see these in answer choices, generally these are not the ones you want. If they say, give the child a handout, oops, no, it's not about handouts. Have the students make a list of, well, generally just listing of copying, no. Sometimes making a list of how I feel, okay. But these are generally words that are not good. Confront, you don't confront students, you work with students, etc. So does that answer your question? Okay, good. Anything else before, and we'll kind of review a couple of these ideas as we go along, and we'll be looking at each of the, we'll first look at kind of how to take the test, and then we'll look at the actual domains. Any other questions, comments, or concerns at this point? No? Okay, well, here we go. An overview, the complete competency slides. Wow, isn't that nice to be complete? There we go. Okay, the key to unlocking the Texas. Okay, here we go. What will we learn today? We'll discover how the Texas is structured and what some correct answers look like. And I don't like this word proven, but when I developed this, I was working with a colleague at Pan Am, at what was Pan Am at the time. And she said, no, we got to use the word proven because it has been proven that it works if we follow it. So I never liked that. Strongly suggested successful 4-step strategy. But I will say this, and Juan can maybe verify this. I think people who have gone through this training are almost like at 100% passing rate. So it helps. It should help. That doesn't mean we're going to continue that that streak, but anyway, that's what we're going to do today. So here we go. It's based on learner-centered proficiencies. And in order to do well on the test, and I would suggest not just do well on the test, but to be a successful teacher. But in order to really be a teacher, you got to pass the test first, right? Unfortunately, it sounds like politicians. Well, in order to enact it, you got to get elected first. Yeah. Okay. But anyway, you must embrace the philosophy of learner-centered proficiencies. Learner-centered, not teacher-centered. Learner-centered, student-centered. So we'll look at these 5 areas of learner-centered proficiencies: instruction or knowledge, instruction, excellence, communication, and professional development. So this is kind of a graphic for us to be thinking of for this. We definitely want to continue our professional development in order to gain more knowledge. We have a lot of knowledge right now, but Juan was talking about it a little bit earlier today in his classes, that he's doing a lot of individual learning right now, not necessarily in the classroom with the teacher, with his professor, because he knows that technology changes all the time, and he's going to have to keep up with it on his own. He can't just rely on somebody giving lecture all the time. So professional development, always enhancing knowledge, which will help in our instruction to understand our diverse communities and cater to their needs, along with communication. Now, what's in the center of all of this?
The students.
The student. Why are we doing all of it? I mean, it looks good on our resumes, and we want to enhance ourselves, but it's all for the student, right? It's all for the student. The student must be the center of what we're doing. So the first one is knowledge, learner-centered knowledge. We are keeping abreast of current knowledge and practice, and we're working with our colleagues. As new teachers especially, you want to seek out those colleagues at your campuses who you see, or whom you see, are doing an excellent job, and you want to talk with them for them to enhance your teaching ability. Now, with that being said, they should be seeking you out too. You guys are the new ones. You're coming in with a lot of energy, with a lot of new ideas, which eventually will be tempered with realities of teaching, but it should be a collaboration and always participating in professional development. Okay? This is a key one. Guides learners, this is us as teachers. We guide learners to construct knowledge. Have you gone over constructivism at least a little bit in your coursework here? Constructivism, and I mean, it's certainly much, much deeper than this, but constructivism is the idea that students are building their knowledge. They're not just being told. We're not just lecturing to them and telling them 2 + 2 = 4, so therefore, you got it. What's 2 + 2? 4. They got it. No. 2 + 2 = 4. Okay, well, let's see how that looks. Here, I want you to take these gummy bears, and I want you to take 2 of them. Take 2 of them now, add 2 more, add 2 more. How many do you have? 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, so 2 + 2 = 4. They're constructing the knowledge. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I know that's a very simplistic example, but that's the idea. It's not through osmosis, putting a book to your head, and it's not through just lecture. It's through building it up through experiences. We must make those connections between what is taught and what is out there in the real world. In other words, is it meaningful to our students? We want to make our teaching meaningful. Continuing on with the knowledge, we encourage discussion in our classroom. Again, it's not just about lecturing, it's discussion and really allowing students to discuss. Develop multiple perspectives. The teacher integrates multiple disciplines. What does that mean to integrate multiple disciplines? It can mean a couple of things, but what do you think? To integrate disciplines.
Introduces different,
Okay?
I guess, different kinds of discipline in the classroom.
Okay. In this case, disciplines really means like subject matters. Right?
Learning way.
Right. So when you're teaching social studies, don't forget about the math, don't forget about the science, include those ideas in there for students to be making those connections. If we can make connections, it will become more meaningful and it will become more cemented in us to remember, right? So to not just say, okay, social studies is done, take out your science books, let's forget about social studies, this is science only. Make those connections about how they are integrated, put together. Regarding instruction, we create an atmosphere of trust and openness. We want students to become self-directed. Another term for this, and you might want to write it down, you know this term, but independent learners. Independent learners. I've seen a great shift in this since I began teaching. It seemed like, and I could be wrong, good teachers have always been good teachers doing this, but especially now in the day of high-stakes testing, it got to a point where the student was totally dependent on the teacher for the right answers. And now I'm seeing a lot more of where students become those self-motivated, self-directed students who are becoming independent, like Juan, researching on his own, not waiting for the professor to tell him what the right answer is, but for him to be looking at, or for him to investigate. Always modeling, modeling, modeling. We talked about that with the reading, right? So modeling, it says respectful behavior, absolutely. And also modeling what is to be learned. We don't just tell students, we model it for them. So that discussion, the openness, the atmosphere of trust, this independent learning, and modeling that respectful behavior. So here again, going along with independent learning, we help them to assess their own strengths and weaknesses so that they're able to focus in on what they need to do. And that is part of self-directed learning and becoming critical thinkers. But again, this is what we mentioned a little bit earlier. Always be aware of their age and or their grade to be using materials that are developmentally appropriate, using methodologies that are developmentally appropriate. Okay. What's that? Equity and excellence. Oh my gosh. Equity and excellence. Okay. Let's take the easy one first. Excellence. What's excellence? What's excellence?
To always make sure that you're giving your best as a teacher and to your students?
Yes, very good. But not just you giving your best, but expecting.
The students and to do the best.
That's it. Expecting the best out of students. Always having those high expectations of students to reach that highly successful level. We're never ever going to say, ay, pobrecito, no puedo.
No.
Ay, mire este burro, no. No, never, ever. Right? We have to expect excellence from all our students. And that can be very insidious for some groups, ELLs, special education students, etc. Okay? So excellence, having high expectations for high achievement at all times, right? Okay, equity.
For everyone.
I think that might be a little, maybe not, maybe that's easy. What's equity?
Is it fairness?
Fairness, I love that. Yes. And being fair doesn't mean being equal. Very good. So what's the difference between being fair and being equal?
Being fair, that sometimes some students are going to have more needs than others, and we have to keep them all at the same level. And I learned equity was very difficult for me to learn, but I learned it through a training in which there was a baseball field and there's the gates, and there's a taller student than the other one. So we're not going to give a stool to the taller because he's already tall, so we give stools for the other students to be able to see the field. So we're adding the fairness, but we're not equal because we're not giving the same resources to the same child.
Excellent. We want to give equal opportunity for all students to succeed. That doesn't mean giving equal treatment to all students. Exactly, being fair. So equity and excellence, having high expectations and giving those appropriate accommodations for all students to succeed. That's exactly what it means. Excellent. Okay, so you have this there. You can certainly look at it, but I think the first bullet is the one that we just need to really mention here. We respect and we are sensitive to the needs of all learners. And what's good for Jose might not be great for John. Professional development. You mentioned this. We set and achieve our professional goals. That is part of your evaluation as a teacher now, too. That at the beginning of the year, you write down what you hope to achieve in professional development. You interact effectively with your colleagues. You get feedback from the learners. You work as a team member, and you're always professional and ethical. Always professional and ethical. And of course, we'll be looking at what that means later on. Okay? So any questions about student-centered? I know it was a lot of information. You do have access to it to use as a study guide. But if we can keep in mind that my granddaughter, one of my granddaughters, has a T-shirt that says, "Yes, it is all about me," you know, and I discourage that a little bit, but you know, it's kind of cute, okay? But for us as teachers, no, it's not about us. It's about our students, right? It's student-centered. What are their needs? What are their needs? Okay, let's look at some test-taking strategies before we go into our first competency. Okay, so again, there's that word proven. It gets to me each time I see it, but I told Carmen I was going to leave it the way it was. So a strategy to help uncover the best answer to each question. So what makes it difficult? The amount of verbiage, all the words. You're going to have scenarios that are a page long, right? There's some distracting information in there, information that's not necessary to answer the questions. Many times, not all the times, but many times, all the answers, A, B, C, D, can be correct. So we have to look for which is the best one. Not necessarily, we're going to see that we can cross out a couple at a time, but sometimes it's between one or two or even among one or three, and we have to choose which one is best, and we'll look at how we can do it. And then just don't get lost in the maze. If you're aware of these buzzwords, the vocabulary there, you have a good general sense of what we're talking about today, you won't get lost in the maze. And what I've seen is that people who haven't really studied for the test, they get in there and it's like, whoa, just overload information. But if you know the vocabulary terms and you're not being put off by it, you'll be fine. Okay? Now I know you'll be taking this online, but today what we're going to do is we're going to work with paper and pencil, because that's the way it is. And with any scaffolding, with any strategy like this, you do it manually and then you start doing it automatically in your head. So that's what I'm hoping, is that by the time you take the test, that you'll be underlining, you'll be scratching out all these things in your head and pointing to the right answer. So we'll look at some key words, verbs, we'll cross out wrong answers, and then we will eventually choose the right answer. And I think we'll do a very good job with that today. What we want to do is underline the question. Now again, I'm not always huge on teaching testing strategies for those people who don't need it. I am going to ask today, 2, 5, plus 7, 12, 16, 19, 23, 25, 29, 30 of us here, there are 30 of us here. For the first few practices today, please, let's all underline it, even if you feel like you don't need to, okay? Let's follow these steps today. And by the time we get to question number 20, 25, if you decide I'm going to try it without underlining, without doing the strategies, great. And if you do fine, bravo. But for now, I am going to ask that we follow these strategies. And again, I'm not a huge believer in forcing people to do it after they become successful doing it other ways, but we're going to start off that way today. Okay, so here we go. It says underline the question. I don't see a question mark. There's no, oh, thank you. I was thinking maybe I need to put my glasses on. Yeah, there's no question mark there. But here, what would we underline? What is it that they're asking, really? What is it that we would underline here?
Ms. Jones should take into consideration.
Yeah, very good. In planning instructional activities for the coming year, Ms. Jones should take into consideration all of the following except that. As it had mentioned, it's usually the last sentence in the scenario, right? So we would underline that question, even though there's no question mark here. And then what do? Well, we circle the key words. So here, these are words, you should probably write these down, but again, you have access to this PowerPoint presentation. But best, most likely, first, appropriate, unlikely, not, except, disadvantage, primarily, all, or none. These are key words, right? These are key words. So you're going to see which method is best used. That means the other, bless you. I mean, it might mean that all four are good, but the best one, right? When we see the word accept, and we'll look at this a little bit later, but when we see the word accept, what does that mean? It might mean that 3 of them are good things that normally we should do, so which is the one we should not do, right? They're looking for maybe the worst answer in this case. So looking here, we would probably say that the key words are all of the following factors except. That puts us into a different direction, right? So we're looking for something that's not good. Circling verbs, I think key verbs would be good. So you want to circle is, that's a verb, but this is about planning. That's key. It's not about delivery, it's about planning for her instruction, right? For her PE classes. So looking at those key verbs are important as well. So then it says cross out wrong answers. And let's just go back here, and I know you already saw the answer, but what's happening here? Who can just kind of paraphrase what's going on in this scenario? Yeah, but I mean, before we get here, what's going on here?
Getting ready for a class.
There you go. Yeah, she's getting ready for a class. What kind of class?
Co-ed class.
A co-ed. Oh my gosh. Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. I don't know. I don't know. Should we allow the girls into the Boy Scouts? It's happening, you know. Yeah, of course
think
I should. So co-ed what though? Co-ed PE classes, right? So there's this teacher, she's planning for her PE classes, and she has to be thinking, okay, before I plan, what are the things I need to consider? Right? What are the things that I need to consider? Right? So let's look at it. Should she consider state curriculum guidelines?
Yes.
Always, always, always. You have to look at what the state says we must teach, right? Should she look at students' daily academic schedules? Not necessarily, maybe. Why? I mean, she has them for her 45, 50-minute period. The rest of the day, they have their schedules, so I don't know if she really needs to take that into account. Does she need to take into account learners' needs and interests?
Yes.
Always, 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 we must do that, right? Available equipment and space, would she have to take that into consideration?
Yes.
Possibly, right? So right away, we know that we're saying that she needs to consider all of them except, so which two, at least for now, do we know she must consider? She must, no matter what. A and C. So since this is an except question, those won't be the right answer. So we can eliminate those right away. Does that make sense? I hope I'm not getting everyone confused, because I'm starting to doubt myself in my understanding. Yeah. Okay, so then we have to choose between two that are left. If we can always narrow it down. If we have 1 out of 4, what's our percentage? 25%. If we have 1 out of 2, what's our percentage? 50, much higher percentage, you know? We're more likely to get it right. So then, once we have those 2 that are left, the students' daily schedules and the available space and equipment, we have to determine the purpose of the question and always apply learner-centered philosophy to it. You guys already have it. We need to take into account our available space and equipment. How can I plan in, if I'm saying, okay, we're gonna have a 2-minute drill where the students are running up to the foul line and back, running up to half court and back, to the next foul line and back, full court and back, etc. And my classroom is about this big. I can't do that if I don't have the space. I'm going to have to modify or accommodate the learning activity, right? So, yeah, we would cross that one out. That is something that needs to be taken into consideration. So once we have, and you mentioned the term process of elimination, once we've eliminated all the wrong answers, we should have the right answer. In this case, not important for the rest of the day. You know, on an individual basis, maybe. You might find later on, and this happened to my children when they were in band in high school, you know, the band instructor would give them 1 minute to put all their instruments away, etc. Well, my daughter had a class that was on the way other side of the school in another building, and she was getting late for that first period after band. And so then the teacher, after I spoke with him, had to, say, okay, Martita, you can put away your materials 5 minutes early to get going, because the other teacher wasn't going to budge on her being late. So, I mean, there may be some times where the students' daily academic schedules will arise, but when you're planning it out at first, does that make sense? Okay, cool. Do you feel comfortable? Okay, we're going to get 100% of this thing, I know. Okay, in your handout, you have one in here, or in your folder of handouts, you have one in here that says Activity 1, Practice Texas Questions. Do you see that? Okay, Activity 1, Practice Texas Questions. Use the test taking strategy below to answer the following questions. We went over it, I know, rather quickly, but you guys are fast learners, so hopefully there's equity there for everyone, and I am expecting excellence from you all. Underline the question, circle the key words, circle verbs, main verbs, cross out wrong answers, choose between the two answer options. Now again, you may read this and you might see the right answer right away, but I am going to ask for these three that you follow that guideline of underlining the question, circle keywords, circle the key verbs, cross out two wrong answers, and then choose between the last two that you have left. Is that all right? Is that okay? You're all right with that? I assure you that if you can convince me later on that you don't need to do it, I won't force you. But for now, I'm forcing you. Okay, go ahead. There are three questions. There are two on the front and one on the back, I believe here. So please do the three, following those guidelines. are 2 on the front and 1 on the back. There are 3 questions. Once you're finished with all 3, and I know you're not there yet, that's fine, but once you're finished with all 3, just turn to your partner and compare your, place your underlinings, your circlings, and your answers. See if you all have the same thing. Okay, about 1 more minute to finish the 3 and then to discuss with your partners. Yeah? No? Kind of tough?
Yes.
These are the easy ones. Okay, let's see what we got. Okay, and again, this is the first time through. It's everything that we discussed, and I'm sure you discussed it in other classes about cognitive demand. When you're focusing in on the strategy, sometimes the answers don't come as easily, and then you get more accustomed to the strategy, and then the answers come more quickly, right? But anyway, we'll see that today. Let's look at the first one, number 1. What is the question here that you underlined?
The most likely to be right in this school will be 2.
Excellent, right? It might be a little confusing because there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you think those are the answers. No, that's just a list, right? And so down below, the most likely result of her accomplishing this goal will be 2. Now, what was important information here that you really should have circled? Do you think?
Most likely.
Most likely, absolutely. I would agree with that.
Goal 5.
Goal 5, I think that's key. Because if we look at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you know, there might be different goals, but this is most likely for goal 5. So I hope you circled goal 5. That helps us to focus in on that, right? Okay, anything else that you thought was important to circle, or?
I mean, you have to know what goal 5 is.
So you actually circled goal 5. Excellent, yeah. I would have circled it definitely here and then highlighted it or circled or underlined or something. Goal 5, focus in on that one. So what is goal 5?
Learn all students' names as soon as possible and address them by their name.
Very good, yes. Okay, so the most likely result of her accomplishing this goal, that one that you just read for us so beautifully, will be to what? What do you think? A, bravo, yes, very good. Which two, and I should have gone through it this way, but is there any one there that you definitely said, no, that's not it, let me get rid of this one right away?
Promote.
Definitely, I would say,
C.
yeah. B, student adherence to established behavior guidelines by knowing their names? Nah, right? Definitely not that one. Just by you knowing their names, does that increase their cooperation? No, probably not. That's more of cooperative grouping or something. But yeah, the best answer for this one is A. A, bravo. Okay, bless you. Now, what about Ms. Schmidt and Mr. Alanis? What's the question here? Go ahead, say it nice and loud. Oh, man, can you? If you want, I'll be right here. You say it and I'll read it to you.
The approach of providing students with a choice is most likely to help students to become self-motivated by
Oh, very good. That's it. Okay, keywords.
self-motivated.
Self-motivated, I would think so. Very good. Most likely, again, I know you're going to maybe get a little tired of that, but not really. That's going to really help you focus in on this as well. So, anything else?
I also circled lack of interest.
Okay.
Because clearly, I mean, it's history. It's kind of a topic where kids are not very interested in. So you want to gear your curriculum towards.
Very good, yeah, because I mean, there is this lack of interest, so how are we going to get them self-motivated, right?
Yeah.
I would say that's a perfectly fine term to circle there. Okay, so did anybody put providing students with choice? Choice, okay, yeah, I think that's part of the key too. That's what the teacher is going to do, right? So then you know that that's most likely to help them to become self-motivated. So the choice to help them to become self-motivated, which ones did you cross out? Like you said, no, giving them choice is not going to do this. Which one? B, stimulating their curiosity about historical personalities? Okay, maybe. Okay. What else? D, increasing their willingness to, I think so. For the sake of utilizing the internet. Oh, I'll do it just because I get to use the Google. Come on, I mean, they're on their cell phones right then anyway. So yeah, I would say D, wrong. So what is the best answer for this one?
C.
The answer is C. C. Oh, come on. No, really? No, that's fine. Now, why do you think, and that's good, if you narrowed it down to A and C, you're on the right track. Okay? But giving them choice, if I say you can choose this one or this one or this one, what happens? They choose and it's mine now, right? So the idea here is that it promotes a sense of ownership. They haven't talked about independent research skills yet. I mean, that is a skill, right, that is going to have to be taught. But if you can choose, that means you're taking ownership of it. Do you see why C is the better answer between A and C? Or
I eliminated A because it says it says that their lack of interest in history, and they're not there to, for the sake of research skills, they're there to get interested in history.
Very good. I would agree with that statement as well. It's not just about research, it's about them taking ownership of it. Even though C does talk about investigations, which is research and stuff, but yeah, I would totally agree with that statement. Okay, are we all right with that? We're gonna get better as we go along. Yeah, okay, so what about number 3 on the back side? Mr. Wong's class. Uh-oh, geez, social studies again? Oh, that. Okay, so question here, what did you underline for the question here?
Mr. Wong could have best avoided this communication problem by changing his explanation of the project in which the following ways.
Very good. So that is the question. Now, what did you circle there? Avoided, I think so, avoided. You don't want to do this again. You want to learn from mistakes. How can you not do the same mistake again? You avoid it. Okay, anything else that you did? Communication problem, I would agree with that. Explanation.
Confused.
They're confused.
Yeah, going back up into the class is confused. Confused is a key
The
word.
steps.
Steps.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Is it Randy?
Yes, sir.
Randy? I remember Randy. Yeah, oh yeah, that's right. I would say steps. So, and especially once you look at the answer choices, right? Yeah, I would certainly say steps are crucial here. Especially they're confused about the steps, you know? Okay, so, any that you crossed out that were just like, come on, be for real. B. A, give a more detailed explanation. Explanations aren't going to usually cut it, right? Good, so I would have gotten rid of A probably too. Any other ones?
B, being sure.
B, being sure that they pay attention. Okay, sit up, pay attention. The kid could be looking right at you and thinking about something else, right? So paying attention, that is crucial, but make sure during an explanation, I don't know about that one. Okay, so now it's between C and D.
D says handouts.
Yes, I would say, it says
C
handout.
doesn't say
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so you don't want to just give them a handout, you want to explain it.
There you go. You don't, handouts may not be bad, but in conjunction with a conversation would be much better, right? So between C and D, what is the better answer choice?
C.
Did you all get that one?
Yeah.
Oh, I feel much better. Good. All right. I knew you would. Okay. Any questions about this? Now, what is your name? I'm sorry. Alma. Alma brings up an excellent point, and I want to mention this, and I maybe should have put it up here for this, but we'll talk about it, and you might want to write this down. And maybe we could say it like this: more activities, the better. More activities, the better. And that's maybe too general, but the idea is this, that again, when we talk about finding the best answer choice, looking at D, providing students with a more detailed written handout, under some circumstances, that might be the best choice. It's not a bad thing to give out a detailed report or a detailed explanation, but look at C. There's another activity attached to it. Handing out the guidelines and discussing them. So the more activities in one answer choice, the better. If one of them was discussing the answer choices, or discussing the guidelines, and another one was providing them with a more detailed written handout, those are both kind of good things, but the better one would be to combine them, right? More than one activity to address the problem. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. I think we're ready to do this thing. We were ready at 8 o'clock. I know we were just late. But I think we're ready to do this thing now. Yeah? So how we'll do this is we'll go over each competency. Okay? And at the end of each competency, we'll answer 3 questions about that competency. And for the first few competencies, I am going to ask that you continue to underline the question, circle important information, and then cross out the incorrect answer choices to the best of our ability, and then come up with the right one. Okay? And then once we get to like competency 6, 7, do you know how many competencies there are? 13. 13 competencies, okay? So once we get to about competency 6, 7, if you say, you know what, I want to try it without doing those steps, and you're getting the right answers, hallelujah, that will be fine. You don't need to. But for now, let's do it in those. Okay, so now let's look at the meat of it. Competency 1 deals with human development. Human development. So let's look at some of the best practices for young children. Now, the PPR, what grade levels does the PPR encompass? Do you know?
EC through 12.
Right. What does EC mean?
Early childhood.
Early childhood. So we're looking at our district, we have 3-year-olds, man. Oh, jeez, that'd be tough for me to be in that classroom. It's so much fun to go visit for like 5 minutes and then I'm out of there. But, no, I'm not. Okay, so we're going to have to know, even if you're going to be a high school biology teacher, you're going to have to know what's appropriate for EC, early childhood, young children, 3-year-olds, etc., right? So for young children, plan for short attention spans, right? How long is an activity going to be? 15 minutes, maybe tops. 10 to 15 minutes. 20 minutes gets to be a little long. There may be times, okay, the 20 minutes might be all right for an activity, but 10 to 15 minutes, right? At high school, maybe we could have a 30-minute activity, 40-minute activity if it's meaningful and so on. But for little kids, short attention span. So now that I think we got, what's this? Egocentrism.
They only think about themselves.
I know. Don't you hate that about
That's my
kids?
3-year-old.
Yeah, don't you hate that? There are other people that know, like my granddaughter says, yes, it is all about me.
It's about me.
And that's true. I mean, that's just a natural stage of development for little kids. They don't know enough to be thinking about the rest of the world. They're just thinking about me. That's right. Me, 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 me. We have to help direct them to not become selfish and things like that. But that's the way they view the world. It's all about me. I'm experiencing these things. It's all for my benefit, right? Ability grouping negatively impacts. Here are 2 terms that you should know. Homogeneous and heterogeneous. Do you know those terms? Homogeneous, heterogeneous. Let me write those down if we're not too sure. And this comes up later on. But homogeneous and heterogeneous. Okay? Homogeneous, homo means the same. So when you have homogeneous groupings, you're putting kids who are the same together. And generally in school, that means ability grouping. Oh, here are the bluebirds. They're doing very well. They know how to read. They're in this group. The blackbirds, they're still sounding out their letters. They're in the low group here in 3rd grade. No, we want heterogeneous. Hetero means mixed. Heterogeneous groupings. So ability grouping, if we're making them homogeneous grouping, that negatively impacts. Now I know some parents of some bright, smart kids will say, I don't want my daughter being dragged down by that child who's not as bright as my child in that group. The research would show that everyone benefits from heterogeneous grouping. Everyone. The lower ability student benefits from the knowledge that the higher ability student has. The higher ability student benefits from either a different viewpoint of the lower ability student or through the mere act of trying to explain something. So again, we won't get into that too much, but just know, homogeneous grouping, no. Heterogeneous grouping, yes. They learn best through multisensory experiences. What's that, multisensory? Using our senses, listening, speaking, reading, no, not reading. Listening, speaking, feeling, moving, right? Smelling, tasting, those types of things. That's how best they learn. They need manipulatives and concrete experiences. Again, we probably know these terms, but I just want to make sure. Manipulatives, what are those?
Hands-on activities.
Hands-on activities, hands-on, things that they are manipulating. Very good. Adolescents. How old are adolescents?
Like 13.
There you go. Right, 13, which is the end of middle school, 14, generally high school, right? So we're looking middle school to high school for adolescents. They prefer to construct knowledge on their own instead of just be told, right? Here we get into that constructivism again. You set up the conditions for them to manipulate things, for them to learn it, not just being told.
You say 13?
Adolescents. I'm sorry?
What was that again?
That when we talk about adolescents, we're talking
Okay,
teens.
okay. Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sorry. No, please ask if
No.
I'm going too
Yeah.
quickly or if I'm not explaining it well. Okay? Adolescents benefit from interacting with peers, especially when they're learning something new. So keep these things in mind as we answer. I think the first one we all know, identity formation is an important part of adolescent development. They are trying to figure out who they are. And as teachers, what do? We try to make sure that it's meaningful for them so that they can continue to formulate their identity and make connections to the world. Who matures more quickly, girls or boys?
Girls.
Girls, absolutely. So this can be a disadvantage for boys. Boy, I'm sure those of you who have been on a middle school campus or in a 5th grade classroom, sometimes you have these little boys that with their real high voices, and then you have these girls who are well developed physically. And that can be tough for a lot of boys. And it can be tough for the girls too. Absolutely. Late maturing boys may suffer socially, tend to develop negative self-perceptions, and are more likely to have conflicts with their parents. So again, this is a part of human development. What does that mean for us as teachers? I don't care, I'm teaching social studies. You're going to learn it anyway. Well, we need to take these things into account. The affective domain is always going to be there. Stages of development, the first one is sensory motor. Okay, from 0 to 2 years of age, this is where you'll see kids putting things in their mouth all the time, right? Kids are putting things in their mouth. That's how they learn about it, right? They're touching things, they're looking at things. Pre-operational, between the ages of 2 and 7. They can now represent those images mentally, or those objects mentally. So at the age of 2, can kids develop the idea of what a dog is? Certainly. But how will they do that? With a dog being there. With a dog being there. So when they're 3, 4, you can say dog, and now they'll have a mental image of it. Does that make sense? Concrete operational, 7 to 12, can reason logically, but only about things that they have experienced. If they've experienced it, they can come up to it with a logical conclusion about it. But if they haven't experienced it, very difficult. So again, when we look at these ages, this is definitely before school. 2 to 7, what grades are we looking at here?
Kinder through second grade.
Yeah, probably kinder through 2nd, right? Kinder is generally about 5, 1st is 6, 2nd grade is 2nd. So then, maybe that's why STAR starts in 3rd grade, right? Because generally this stuff is true. Concrete operational, 7 to 12, what grades are we looking at there?
3rd through 6th.
Yeah, 2nd through about 6th or 7th, right? Then formal operational. This is where we're looking at 7th grade on up, 8th grade on up. Can understand abstract concepts, begin to become concerned about identity and social issues. Now, what does this mean? Just generally speaking, before 7th grade, 8th grade, we need to move from the concrete to the abstract. Does that make sense? We can't just say, again, 2 plus 2 equals 4, right? Duh, it makes sense. See, 2 and 2 equals 4 and 4. There you go. We need to have them manipulate their environment in order to understand that stuff. They can reason logically, but only about things that they've experienced, not just been told that they have experienced. So, before 8th grade, if you want to write this down, before 8th grade, we must go from concrete to abstract. We can't just deal with the abstract. When we're in high school, we can start off with abstract thoughts. But before that, we must go from concrete to abstract. Does that make sense? Vygotsky. I think you saw a little bit of him in the language acquisition and development about Lev Vygotsky, the Russian neurologist. But he emphasized the role of social interaction. He says we learn by interacting, not by being told. We learn by interacting. In the zone of proximal development, this term is here too, ZPD. What is the zone of proximal development? The zone of proximal development is exactly this. If you know this already, grand. If not, you might want to write this down. The ZPD, the zone of proximal development, is that area between what you already know and what you can do on your own. It's the zone of proximal development where interaction with someone who is more competent than you guides you through that next stage. The ZPD, the zone of proximal development. And you know, I remembered this because of Spanish. El prójimo, Benito Juárez, right? I always think of Benito Juárez when I think of Vygotsky. Isn't that a strange thing? How we make those mental connections. But, you know, your neighbor, you know, your prójimo, right? The person next to you. So the zone of proximal development, we can only get to a certain level of competence on our own. Once we get there, we need the help of someone, or now, since we are rather competent, something, a book, or a film, or something, to get to that next level. Does that make sense? And how do we do that? Through interaction. We learn through interaction. Scaffolding are temporary supports, or I should say scaffolding is a temporary support. Kind of like today, with underlining the question, circling the important information, crossing out the wrong answers. That's a scaffold, because eventually you'll get rid of that. It just helps you get to that next level. Does that make sense? So, any questions about ZPD, the zone of proximal development? The big takeaway here is to allow students, not allow, but to encourage and to set up opportunities for students to interact. Right? Yeah. Erickson's stages of development, trust versus mistrust, 0 to 18 months, and boy, we see this in a lot of people. If they have not developed that trusting relationship, especially with the mother, it certainly can be with the father. It says caregiver there, it's generally the mother. If they do not develop that within the first 18 months, then it's very tough for them to ever trust people. Autonomy versus shame and doubt. From 18 months, a year and a half to 2 years, learning control and independence with physical skills versus developing a sense of helplessness and embarrassment. Again, giving those opportunities for children to explore their bodies and what they're able to do, instead of just telling them, no, don't touch, no, don't, that's bad, don't do that. From 3 to 6, initiative versus guilt, a desire to do things beyond taking care of yourself versus developing an inferiority complex. From 6 to 12, and I think this is where more of the questions on the PPR would come in. Industry versus inferiority. A desire to be successful at school or with peers versus developing a feeling of inferiority. Now, what happens if we give the tools to students to succeed? And we look at individual students, what their needs are to succeed. We avoid a whole host of problems later on. If students aren't successful early on, that gap just grows, right? And boy, you've seen it at the middle school level. If they're not successful, what happens? It's like, yeah, no me important. I don't care. And what do? I have to be here, so I'm going to act out in different ways. And a lot of times that acting out is a feeling of inferiority, right? So again, why is this important for us? We need to give the tools to the students to be successful. We want excellence. Remember equity and excellence? Excellence, we demand excellence for all students. But that equity is there too to support that, right? We don't just demand it, we help them get there. Yeah? Identity versus role confusion. Task is to develop a sense of who you are. Intimacy versus isolation. Form a meaningful relationship with another versus developing feelings of loneliness. And again, you know, this seems kind of heady. It's there for you to look at. I wouldn't worry about it so much. And I'm not asking you to ignore all the rest of Erickson. It's fascinating stuff. But really, the area you want to focus on is industry versus inferiority. If we give them the tools to be successful, those feelings of inferiority do not develop. And it also leads to independent learning, right? Whoops. Okay, stages of play. This really does go from little child to not as a little child, okay? So solitary, playing alone, perfectly normal for kids at the age of 1, 2, 3 to play alone. Sometimes we encourage them to play with others, but it's all right if they're playing alone. That's human development. Remember, this is competency 1, which is all about what? Human development. This is typical. Then, onlooker. They've been playing alone, and then they see other kids playing. They don't join in right away. They're looking at them. They're looking at them, observing, seeing what they're doing. Oh, wow, they're taking the can, filling it up with sand. Okay, what are they going to do next? The onlooker, perfectly fine. This is the one that's kind of interesting. Before they start getting in there with the other kids, they do this parallel play where they're side by side doing pretty much the exact same thing, but not together. Pretty soon, the kids who are in the sandbox playing with the sand, with the pails and the shovels, this kid will go in and not say, hey, can I play with you? They'll go in and they'll pick up a pail and a shovel and they'll be looking at them and doing the same thing. And that's fine. That's fine. Then play associative, where they play side by side, but not necessarily cooperating. They might be interacting a little bit, but they're not helping each other to do a task. Does that make sense? So the difference between parallel and associative: parallel, they're really in their own little worlds. They might be looking a little bit. Associative, they might be interacting, but they're still just doing their own thing. Then we get to cooperative, cooperation, cooperative. Planning and working together. Okay, I tell you what, let's build a castle. You do this part and I'll do this part and we'll put it together and we'll build this really nice castle. Does that make sense? So again, what we want to know from this is that it's perfectly normal for kids not to interact with others right away. Eventually they get there. Right? Does that make sense? Number 1 down. We got it. Right? Competency 1, human development. We understand human development very deeply, I know, after that 10-minute presentation. Okay, so any questions or comments about human development? Okay, so in your packets, where do I have mine? In your packets, you should have this. After activity 1, forget about activity 2, because we're not going to do that. Then you have all these vocabulary terms. I suggest you look at those, and as I mentioned earlier, the definitions are there, but if during your free time today, if you want more explanation about those, please feel free to ask, certainly about the buzzwords. But go to where it says Texas Practice Test, EC 12, page 1, Competency 1, Human Development. Do you see where we're at? Okay. Yeah? This is where we're going to do what I had mentioned a little bit earlier. After each competency, we're going to look at Texas-style, PPR style questions for us to answer. And we want to go through that process, please, for now, of underlining the question, circling important information, eliminating wrong responses, and choosing the right one. Right? So we have 3 questions here. That's it, just the 3 for this domain. How much time do we need for 3 questions?
45 minutes.
How much? Okay. I'll have after-school tutoring for you. No, I'm kidding. No, you don't do that. That's never the first option. Okay, tutoring. No. Okay. No, I'll work with you individually and we'll get that number down. I tell you what, let's try, how much?
3 minutes?
Oh, boy, that would be pretty quick. I say, let's try about 9 minutes. I'll give you 3 minutes per question, and it's very possible that by the time we hit 5, everybody's done. But I'll say I'll give you 9 minutes. By the time we get to competency 10, I'm telling you, it's not going to be 9 minutes, right? But let's try it for now. About 9 minutes. Please follow the steps. If you get finished before the 9 minutes are up, turn to your partners and start comparing your answers. Okay, as I say, when you're finished, or when you do, when you finish with the 3 questions, go ahead and talk with your partner, see if you agree on your answer choices. Keep me on track, Mark. Okay, about 1 more minute before we go over.
These words are more kids to us.
You feel confident?
I think so.
I'm not gonna give you my answer.
That sounds like no.
I think so.
Are you confident? Well, I think so. Okay, here we go. Here we go. By the way, how many questions are on the PPR?
The what?
There are 90.
90, yeah, that's the content.
There are 90. You need to get a score of 240. You need to get a score of 240 to pass, right? But there are 90 questions on the test. 80 of them count. 10 of them are field-based, but they don't tell you which are which. They won't say, go ahead and do number 35, but this one may not count. They don't tell you that. They're field test questions. How long do you have to take the test? Very good. That one you got right. So if you think about it, how much time do you have for each question, more or less?
About 3 minutes.
Well, how many minutes are in an hour? 60. So if it's 5 hours, how many minutes is that?
You have like 3.5 minutes.
Thank you. 350, or 5 times 60 is 300. You have 300 minutes, 90 questions. So you have about 3.33333. Put a little line over it because it's just going to keep going 3 minutes per question. You can think of it that way. Now the scenarios are much longer, so you'll be spending your time on the scenarios. But just so you know, if you're in there and after an hour, you have 20 minutes or 20 questions answered, you're right on track, right? If you have five questions answered after an hour, you need to speed it up a little bit. It was designed to be done in about 2.5 hours, but they give you 5. Okay, just so you know. So, Janetta, the 4-year-old girl, she seems to prefer the construction center. She enjoys working alone. Uh-oh, problematic area maybe, I don't know. What do you think? You already underlined the question, you circled the important information, right? What's the best answer to number 1?
B.
Letter B is in boy, bravo, and in bravo, right? Yes, very good. She is in the predictable stage of parallel play. No problem, she's okay, don't force her. She's cool. Okay. What about number 2? What's the question?
What would be the best instructional approach for him to follow accommodate learning?
Very good. Now, what's important information here? I think this is
Cognitive development.
cognitive development. What?
Best instruction.
Best instruction.
7th grade.
7th grade. Oh man, boy, that kind of sends up a flag in that. 7th grade. That's right on the cusp, right, of maybe human developmental change, right? So 7th grade. Yes. Anything else?
Concrete and formal.
I think that's a big one. Concrete and formal thought. That's kind of concrete and abstract thought. So, oh geez, this might get a little tough, but I bet you anything you got it.
A.
The answer is A.
Yes.
A. Okay, now, I'm glad somebody mentioned B, because this is a learning moment.
But it says
Okay?
always, and it's not always.
Thank you. Yes. Did I put that? I should have put this on here. Always and never. Uh-oh, let me add these words. If I had put these words up, it's my fault. If I had put them up earlier, then you would have known that, no.
If it has those words.
It's usually
And they work for some activities, but
But
not all.
generally not. And to always use cooperative grouping, oh God, after a while, kids are gonna be saying, no, please, do we have to again? Yeah, so the better answer here, yeah, certainly C is wrong, right? Offer tutoring, like, that was my joke with you, right? That's not your first step ever. Is tutoring a good thing? It certainly can be, but that's not the first thing you do if somebody is having problems. Look at D. I hope you crossed this one out. Don't worry about. I hope you crossed that one out. You didn't even finish reading the sentence. No, you should always finish reading. So it was between A and B, right? So A, use as many manipulatives as possible while focusing on activities that lead learners to more abstract content.
Yeah.
Why is that a better answer?
Because cognitive development.
Yes.
Hands-on.
What about that? I'm waiting, Randy.
Because it's hands-on.
Don't disappoint me,
No, because that
man.
was the key word, and I circled it.
Okay. Very good.
To me, I feel like it's
Yeah.
new with accommodate, because you're trying to accommodate to all learners.
Accommodate is always a good
So to
thing.
me, you need to have different manipulatives.
There you go. Accommodate is a very good thing.
Differentiating instruction.
So using manipulatives, remember, and again, I wasn't just trying to give you the answer before, but really this is the area that is tested most, those areas of the cusp where kids are moving from one level to the next. And we expect, hey man, they're in 7th grade, they're in 8th grade, they should be doing abstract. Well, some kids aren't quite there yet. That is the human development, but we all mature or we all develop at a little different rate. And so therefore, what are we doing there in 7th grade? You move from the concrete to the abstract, right? So A is the better answer choice here. Okay, number 3, we know what the question is, right? I hope you underline that. What's important information here?
10th grade.
10th grade, man, I love it that you're focusing in on the grade. You should always, because again, 10th grade, 1st grade, huge difference. Or as our commander-in-chief would say, huge.
It's like 16, 17.
Huge difference.
Student told her.
So we have that 10th grade. What else?
Student told
No
her
value.
that school was no value.
Yeah, school had no value for her. That's important, right? Okay, so what developmental knowledge or development knowledge does Carolyn need to understand the student's perspective? Did you cross out any right away?
B.
B and D.
Yeah, the student may be having financial problems at home. Come on, I mean, that could be true, but, you know, there's no indication in here that has nothing to do with development either, right? So, I mean, it could be true, and that's a huge concern, but that has nothing to do with this particular problem. Yeah, C, I would say probably C you could get rid of, because we know the child's in 10th grade. How old is the child there?
Like 16.
Like 16, 17, so that's well past that concrete operational stage. That's well past, right? So, you know, if they said this child was 10, 11, 12, 13, maybe even 14, maybe, I don't know. But you wouldn't even make that assumption if she's saying there's no need anyway. So what is the better answer here between A and D?
I would go A.
I would go with A too, and I think you went with the right one. Very good. How's it going? If we got 2 out of 3 on this page, we're on the right track. Right? We're on the right track. We're getting there. So at least we have this idea of human development, yeah? Okay, well, I would love to continue on, but I've been told by the slave master, the taskmaster, I should say, over here, Juan, this guy, he is keeping me on task. He's so good at that. It's 10:32 and time for a break. So we will meet back at 10:42. We have 10 minutes. Okay? We're cool with that? Enjoy your break.
Or we can play Evil Apples, which is on TV.
Where's my
I send out a code
Not all.
to everybody who has
Like who?
See,
then
I have
you
kids.
start playing Cards Against Humanity, but on your phone.
I know. Like it's A, B, C, D.
Can I give
Like
Everybody plays it. It's your turn. You're out for that round. Everybody submits their card. Just a question.
I picked one, yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
You don't know what
I was so confused. Sit down.
Put in the palette, Juan, put in the palette. Yeah, he just gets it. I've never played that. Yeah, it's okay. I watched.
It's crazy. I don't really believe in that.
Well, I mean, I don't either, Dad, but I mean, like he starts telling me how these things. The tasteless
It's like a little co-op. You pilot a little spaceship with your co-op buddy.
Not even ladies that get into
Oh, really? How was it?
That's because it's a lot.
Want to play a game? Oh, I think it's yeah, I'm off the bright light. Right, so the bottom is jumping. Okay, that's all you need. So we're gonna be in a spaceship. It's gonna have terminals, and each terminal does something else. So like the cardinal terminals are the turrets, and there's a terminal here for the shield, and the middle one is the boost. Okay, let me open this. Where's the boost? You see that? Metal gel. Let me try putting that on the shield. No, I got it. Alright. So get on the right turn and shoot this. This game is strictly fun. Do you want to pilot or do you want to mandatory? Alright, I'll pilot. We just check it.
They should be seated. They should be seated.
572.
Who's in what? Alright, ready? I'm gonna fly, so you're gonna protect with it.
Yeah, I got it.
I'm seeing that.
What's that?
Oh, it's like our heaviest artillery. So it's this one right here where I'm at. Yeah, press it. But you can't control where it is.
So it's just going.
Yeah, it's always rotating.
I think we're finding his drone. What's up, bro? Are we still on for our date? Yeah, bro.
Yeah.
Hey, I was telling him. Yeah, I got it because my girlfriend. So we usually order food in there. She lives like maybe like 10 minutes away, so we just and it even shows me this. You can order right now. Shouldn't we order it? You can order it and they'll have it ready by the time you eat.
I mean, yeah, it's kind of shady. Yeah, cool.
Well, that's the thing, you order it. So it's like, you want to make it.
I'll just order it there.
Are you gonna order right now?
You can order right now.
I guess.
No, you pay.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Dude, that's what I'm getting.
I'll take the seasoned
In the first thing. I don't know what the first
Stolen? She took them. What's wrong with you? Classic girlfriend.
order.
What are the pieces?
Well, it's weapon two. So they're going to be ordered at 12.
And then when the science ones comes up, I just pick them and judge next time. I don't know.
Yay! No news.
How was
there's not spark.
No, I mean here.
We parked in the same place.
Okay, good.
At least I always do.
Did you have carpool or take your
Me and Randy went. That's why he's like, are we out for a date? Did I get it?
Okay, cool. If I pass the hard one, let's get it.
There's no digital.
Okay, I just got my text. You want to order it now? What do we play?
Start.
Okay, it's 10:42. We shall continue. Okay, so we're set to continue? All right, good. I love that. There, right? Doesn't it just, yeah, I'm there. Thank you. Only one responded. Okay, not a good percentage. 1 out of 29, not a good respondent, but I'm happy for that. Okay, so we are now on competency 2, and this is a quick one. Doesn't take away from its importance. Basically, the same number of questions are for each competency. So if we have 90 questions, have 90 questions, and there are 13 competencies. About how many questions per competency will there be? Seven. About 6 or 7 for each one. There could be one where it goes to 8, but generally each competency has the same number of questions, okay? So you'll want to know each competency fairly well. If one of them you bomb, you'll pass on all the rest. But that's why I just want to mention diversity is pretty quick here, but it doesn't take away from the number of questions you're going to have or the importance of diversity. It's very important, okay? So, diversity. Best practices. Discuss ethnic issues openly. Now, this can be tough. This can be tough. Because we certainly want to be part of the discussion as teachers, but we have to be very careful about giving the answer, giving the right answer. If somebody talks about, a certain people being oppressed or something, we can't say, no, they're not oppressed. That's just political stuff you're hearing. The reality, we have to be careful. We have to have these discussions openly and honestly with our students and allow them to discuss ethnic issues openly. Now, we live in an area that's a little different from the rest of Texas. If we were in Houston, the ethnic conversations would be very different, because in Houston we have a lot of different ethnic groups present. Here in the Valley, not as many. 90% Latino, and very small percent Anglo, smaller percent African American. So again, the discussions may not be as robust, you might say, regarding different ethnicities, but still it's an issue here, especially when we're talking about the history of the oppression of Latinos here, the dominance of the Anglo culture, etc. So I mean, these are discussions that need to be had openly, honestly, and I'm going to add one more word there, which we saw earlier, but you may want to add this here, is respectfully. Right? There's nothing wrong with someone voicing his or her opinion, but you need to develop that culture in the classroom of respect. Utilize cooperative learning. Again, homogeneous cooperative learning, not as effective, and you try to shy away from that, as heterogeneous. How will this help out in the diversity? Well, diversity, we talk about ethnic diversity, but we can talk about maybe intellectual diversity. We can talk about experiential diversity. We can talk about gender diversity. So when we utilize cooperative grouping or cooperative learning, in those cooperative groups, you want to be as diverse as possible. Does that make sense? You don't want all the white boys sitting together and all the Latina girls sitting together. And no, right? It needs to be a mix. Avoid competition and ability grouping. Now, I need to clarify this somewhat. My superintendent loves competition. I mean, he's always throwing out these competitions all the time to the schools. Let's see who does the most AR points, Let's see who decorates the halls best for Halloween, etc. So there's nothing wrong with some competition in the class. Can you have a spelling bee between two groups and see who wins and you congratulate the winning group? Absolutely. But the culture of competition needs to be avoided. In other words, to show your worth, you need to win. No. Does that make sense? So there's nothing wrong with some activities that involve some competition. But to have a competitive, cutthroat type of culture in your classroom, no. We talked about ability group. This is an asterisk, and we'll see this later on too, but special needs students should be placed in the regular classroom. Now, we will talk about special education later, but we don't say, oh, that child has a learning disability, keep him out of my class. That child has a learning disability, He comes into the class, we accommodate and modify the instruction for that child, right? Now, there are students who are severe and profound, nonverbal students, students who are unable to control their bodily movements. Many times there is a separate classroom for those students, but for anything else, especially, and even then, I remember, and I'm not saying I was a saint at all, but I remember even when I was teaching, I would have those kids come into our classroom every once in a while. It wasn't just good for them, it was good for my students to be exposed to that as well. But anyway, but generally they wouldn't be able to survive in a regular classroom too much. However, students with learning disabilities, students with autism, students who are considered 504 need to be in the regular classroom. Do we accommodate? Do we modify? Yes. But they need to be in the regular classroom. We do not segregate them out. We talked about ability grouping and the different types of cooperative grouping. Avoid grouping by gender as well, because that can increase biases. For and against. You know, girls are smarter in this area, boys are smarter in this area. No, we want these utilize cooperative grouping, cooperative learning with heterogeneous groups, right? We're going to see about cultural relevance in a moment, but use materials from diverse writers. And again, you know, I kind of joke about this, but when I was in high school, I think some of my teachers were kind of progressive, and we were reading African American literature back when I was in high school. Somewhat, but generally speaking, it was all dead white guys, you know, that we were reading. We need to be diverse to have a different outlook on it. And we'll see how this plays into cultural relevance as well for our students. Use role-playing activities. What does that mean? Role-playing activities. When we're talking about diversity. Remember, competency 2 is diversity. So when they say use role-playing activities, what do you think they mean by that? Act out what?
Like something from a history
Like a
lesson?
novel or
Yes, skits, something from a novel, right, good place. But again, part of this would be putting someone in a different type of position. In other words, you know, maybe I should play the Indian at Thanksgiving, you know, to get the feel for what it was like for an Indian to be there doing this. And I'm using that term, I know it's Native American, but, right? Have people put into different positions where they're at least trying to understand that position or defend that position,
What
right?
happens to those kids that are like Muslim, like Indian, and then you put them in that situation?
Put them in what situation?
Like in a role play, are they like, are there, you know, are their families, because of their religion, are they?
Well, you always have to be sensitive to those things. I mean, you know, just, I know this isn't what you're saying, but Jehovah's Witness, you can't have them in a play where they're reciting the
Thanksgiving, right.
or yeah, any
Or birthday party.
or birthday parties or things like that. But what I mean is, if I'm understanding you correctly, if let's say you have some Hindus or Hindi in your classroom, don't just give them the Hindu roles each time, you know?
Right.
You know, oh, there's our Indian, give him the role, you know? Yeah. Kama Sutra, no, don't do Kama Sutra, that's a different thing. You want to be careful about stereotyping, and that's the idea. Be
So,
very
like, if
careful
somebody-
about stereotyping. Always give the boy the captain of the ship role.
Right.
No, give it to a girl sometimes.
Right, because I know with diversity right now, especially with like the whole black, you know, black, like whatever's going on right now. Because I'm thinking like, if you're going over something for Martin Luther King, and you have a black kid, do you automatically just say, okay, we're going to put the white? Do you think the black kid would be upset, the African American?
What I would say is this: if you do it once a year, you're doing a disservice to the kids.
Right.
So if you're just waiting for Martin Luther King Day to, hey, I have one African American in my class. Okay, I have a dream. You read that. You're doing a disservice to the kids.
Right.
Right. So this is an ongoing thing that you would want to do. You know, I mean, I would say Black Lives Matter. I think you were kind of getting into Black Lives Matter. That's an ongoing issue right now, right? You might want to have one of your minority students playing the chief of police once in a while, and an Anglo kid playing somebody who's driving in a car that gets profiled.
I'm just saying because it's
You
so
know?
sensitive right now that I can hear parents coming in my classroom and telling me something.
Right.
Not that we have, like you say, the percentage of African Americans.
And that's why discussing ethnic issues openly, honestly, and respectfully needs to occur.
Okay.
And again, if you're with 5-year-old kids
No.
saying, what do you think about Black Lives Matter? That's not going to happen, right?
Yeah.
But at age appropriateness and what their understanding of the world is, because you'll have a 5-year-old kid, I mean, I've heard it, where a 5-year-old kid, Latino, said, Los indios no usan zapatos. No, I mean, I've heard a kid say that. Los indios andan descalzos. I've heard him say that. Well, I mean, that may require a conversation in class.
Right.
A 5-year-old kid, right? Where did he get it? Where did he get it? He got it from his dad.
Well,
or
I
his
had a
mother.
kindergartner one time that we were doing a butterfly thing, and I told him, "You want pink antennas?" And he would tell me, "No, my daddy said that pink is for fancy boys." And you don't know. Nowadays, there's kids that are transgender in classrooms that are trying into that point. So, the other kids heard, and kindergartners didn't know what fancy boy meant because only he was exposed to it by his dad.
And so, bless you. Bless you.
Thank you, sorry.
About what? Don't be sorry. It's very natural.
Oh, well then I'm not.
Good. Take that back. I'm not sorry. Okay. This is the thing. Remember, what does PPR stand for?
Pedagogy, professional
responsibilities. What does professional mean? It means we're making decisions all the time about growth for our students.
Right.
We're going to have to pick and choose our battles. We're going to have to be very careful, but that doesn't mean we shy away either. There may be some parents who get upset. They may not want to. At a board meeting, talking about transgender, a parent came to a board meeting last year saying, hey, with what Obama is doing, I do not want my daughter in a school where they're going to allow a child to decide if he feels like a girl that day going into the bed. I mean, there are sensitive issues that we have to be sensitive about and careful about. That doesn't mean we shy away from them, and it doesn't mean we put our stamp on it to say this is how it is going to be. What this is saying is, again, you as a teacher, depending on what subject matter you're teaching and the grade level you're teaching, you may bring up issues in your classroom to say this is a conversation point that we should have in our classroom. But sometimes, and probably most times, these are things that will occur almost organically in the classroom, where you hear kids talking about, oh, those football players taking a knee, they're disrespecting the flag, and other kids are saying, what do you mean, there's Black Lives Matter? And you may say, we need to have a discussion about it. And if you are open, honest, and respectful, you'll have a leg to stand on if parents come and complain. It's not black and white, it's not cut and dry. You have to be careful about this stuff, but that doesn't mean we shy away from it. Am I making sense with this? Yeah. And so when you have these conversations for role-playing activities, you start off by doing it, and then the conversations after that would lead into, after a different subject comes up, you'd say, well, can you put yourself in the shoes of this person? How do you think Colin Kaepernick feels about this? Why would he do that? Is it his method that you're upset with, or his ideas that you know what I mean? So again, it's not a one-shot deal. It's this ongoing openness, honesty, and respectfulness in the classroom. Am I making sense with that? It's tough, I know. Sometimes we want to just say, no, I don't want to go there. But we have to be careful, and we have to allow for this type of conversation to take place. And we can set it up by using role-playing activities. Having students interview each other. I just was at a school in our district the other day, and it was so cool. I mean, really so cool. We're 99% Latino in our school district, but other kids went home to interview their grandparents and their parents about, they were making a family tree. But then in the classroom, the kids were interviewing each other about theirs. It wasn't just, this is what I found. Then kids were interviewing, so what did your grandfather do and how did he come here? And it was such a culture building activity. When I say culture, I don't mean Latino. I'm talking about that classroom where the kids now felt that they knew each other and cared for each other. So that's a lot of it too. And using reflective journals in the classroom where you give a topic, students write about that topic, and then you can respond to it, by asking more questions, etc. Culturally relevant teaching is extremely important. As I mentioned earlier, lots of times, we read Mark Twain, we read William Shakespeare, we read Henry James, maybe not Henry James so much, but a lot of American writers, Nathaniel Hawthorne, from the 18th, 19th centuries, early 20th century. That's fine to read Jack London. I love Jack London stuff. However, we need to have something that the kids can relate to as well. I think I mentioned last time I was here about reading about cultural relevance and talking about a quinceañera, right? If my brother John, whom I love dearly, reads about a quinceañera, okay, he might be able to sound out the word and he can read the words, but he's not going to have a connection to it, and therefore he's not going to understand it fully, even though he's a good reader. And that can happen for our kids here. If they're always reading about things that are not of their culture, from somebody else's culture, they can read the words and they can understand the words, but they're not going to have a deep understanding of what it is. So we try to bring in these culturally relevant materials so that students can learn from them. But then again, we don't shy away from Chinese writers. We don't have any Chinese students in our classroom, ni modo. We bring in some Chinese readings so that they can read about that culture too. Does that make sense? ELLs, language diversity must be celebrated, respected, and embraced in all classroom situations. We want them to become English proficient. However, we celebrate the language that they have. Language ability should be considered a distinction rather than a deficit. If we say, ay, pobrecito, he doesn't know English, we're going to be treating him in a remedial way. Hey, wow, he doesn't know English, but he knows Spanish. Let's use that as a resource, right? We want to accommodate the instruction rather than singling them out. Okay, and I know you have learned this throughout your learnings as well. So English language proficiency standards, the ELPS, and again, you saw this with your language acquisition and development, but we should know the levels of proficiency are B, I, A, and AH, beginner, intermediate, advanced, advanced high. And we must accommodate our instruction according to their levels. So this is where it gets a little tough, but that's the class we have. We may have kids in our class regarding language proficiency, kids who are beginners, kids who are intermediates, kids who are advanced, advanced high, and non-ELLs, English proficient kids. So we have to look at how do I best address these needs. This beginner is going to need a lot of visuals. The kid who's at advanced high, maybe more vocabulary development at this stage, right? But again, we have to look at the levels of the child and determine the best course of action for each one. You can look at this, you probably already have. You want to familiarize yourself with the ELL expectations by reviewing the ESL supplementary exam from the Texas.
Advanced high.
Beginner,
Yeah, I know that.
intermediate, advanced, advanced high.
Yeah,
So-
but you said that advanced high, they need vocabulary?
I said just as an example, they may not need the visuals as much as, let's say, intensive vocabulary development to get to that next stage.
You said quite asked, right, the last time you were here, that one of the questions says, they give you a paragraph, and then for you to choose
what type of level is the EL, PL level student. So, for example, I run on sentence or,
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
right. Well, for the PPR, they should not do that for the PPR. That may be for the,
Well, that comes from
on the PPR, they'll give you a paragraph and they'll say, what level is this student?
I don't-
Wow. Usually what they have done, boy, that surprises me. I'm not saying it's not true. I'm sorry?
What is the content?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
probably
it's
content.
content.
There you go. Yeah. For the PPR, what they would do is they would say, you have a beginner in class. I mean, they would tell you right off the bat the child's level. And the child is struggling with da-da-da-da. How would you address his needs? That's the type of thing they would do there. And so then you would look at visuals related to vocabulary development, etc. Am I
I got it.
Am I addressing that? It's very possible, well, I don't know, it's possible.
It's more for content.
But yeah, that sounds more like a content, language arts issue, or even really an ESL or bilingual issue that you should know more or less, you know, what level he is. But here they'll just give it to you, I think. Okay, so we're done with competency 2. How do you feel about competency 2, diversity? Yeah? We embrace everybody, right? We embrace everybody. So here we go, competency 2. We had 9 minutes last time. How much time do we need now for 3 questions? 9 minutes again? 10?
9.
We're going in the wrong direction. Okay, let's go 9
We're
again.
still highlighting and.
I would ask you to please continue to underline, circle, etc. And again, I tell you what, if by competency 3 you say, I don't want to do it anymore and I'm doing it fine without, that's fine. I was thinking maybe more around 5 or 6. But okay, so competency 2, diversity, ready, go. 9 minutes. If you get done, feel free to talk to your partners. third of the way in. You didn't even close to 10 minutes. You needed like what, 90 seconds? Oh, okay. Well, we're only 5 minutes in, but are we ready to go over it? Hey, good, very good. You're getting faster already. We're only on competency 2. Okay, let's see what we have. Let's see what we have. Competency 2, diversity. Number 4. What's the question?
What would be the best instructional plan for Martin as he strives to ensure that he is meeting the need of students with special needs?
Very good. That is. And I would almost, well, I would include probably that first part. In consultation with the special education resource teacher as well. But you're right. The question was that, right? Yeah, important terms here. Special needs, special education, best instructional plan. Yeah, I would agree. Which ones?
The need of students.
The needs of students, or the need of students. Yeah, I think so. That's what learner-centered, right? Learner-centered. So, any that you got rid of? Boy, I hope you got rid of A right away. Limit the special needs. Oh boy, whenever we say limit someone, forget it. You know, I mean, to limit their academic aspect. Yeah, okay. You want to do that for me? Okay, yeah, limit could be up there. Yeah, only could be up there too. You're right. Okay, but when it says limit them to independent work, if it says limit limit exterior noises or something, that could be a good thing. But you know, when you limit their ability to do something or limit their options to achieve, definitely always wrong. Almost always wrong. Okay, any others that you just got rid of right away? C. Yeah, and do not have an opportunity to interfere with any other student. No, always using direct teach for all students, going to be wrong. So now it's between B and D. What's wrong with B?
Cognitive development.
Yeah, it's talking about the cognitive development of those specific students.
They're saying plan activities that address social skills rather than cognitive? Yeah, no, we're not going to help them to learn. What? That's right out as well, right? So the best answer for number 4 is? D as in dog. Very good. Okay, now number 5. This one may have caused some issues. I tell you what, let's just go straight to the answer for this one. What do you have for your answer?
C.
D is the answer. And let's look at it, because I know some people did get D, and let's see why C may be better than D. Okay, so A is out. Always place student from the same culture in the same group. Oh, jeez. Totally wrong. In B, each time there is a group activity within a unit, allow students to choose the members of their groups. Oh, in hopes that they get along? Not after you've read what's happening. There may be times where you say, choose your partners for this activity. But here, oh my gosh, they're from different cultural backgrounds. They're using demeaning and unacceptable terms. No way. They're going to choose their own. And it's just going to inflame the situation. So A and B are out. So we're down to C and D. Let's look at C. What do you like about this one?
It's multiple activities.
Multiple activities. Yes, addressing the situation. Right?
Share.
Clearly defined, shared decision making, everybody's involved, clearly defined, everybody's on the same page, and consequences for not. That's pretty good. Let's look at D though. I mean, this one looked kind of good too. Include participation, attitude, respect, and peer support. Oh, I like that. As elements of the assessment system. That's not so bad. It's starting to get a little weird there, though, because the TEKS don't talk about that. The TEKS say they must know this, right? But, if you say, okay, I'm going to include a little bit, and explain how these elements carry as much weight as academic performance, that's where it goes off the rails. And again, my children, they loved school, but when the social studies teacher, who was also the JV basketball coach, would say, if you come to tonight's game, you're going to get 50 extra points for class. I don't know, how valid is that for a mark of what you know and understand for social studies, right? So, are they high expectations that we have for behavior in class? Yes, but can we say it's going to carry as much weight as an assessment? We have to be very careful there.
Some of us had projects in high school and in college where we were kind of grouped together. But part of our assignment was that we got our presentational grade from the teacher, but we also graded ourselves. Not just I grade me, but I graded, I guess, my peers who worked with it, and that was also taken into consideration when the grade was around, or as a different grade altogether. How could we address that?
Yes, we certainly want students to get to the self-assessment, and we're going to even kind of see the next question kind of deals with that somewhat, right? There's nothing wrong with getting students accustomed to working as a team, working cooperatively, to self-assess. There's nothing wrong with that. The thing we have to be very careful of is that assesses that type of group project. That really should not come into play for how much you know, right? And especially if we haven't helped the students to really develop that idea of self-assessment. Because I've been in classrooms where the teacher says, I'm going to have them self-assess, and the kid says, 100%. I got 100. What is that based on? Well, I think I got 100%. And the teacher said I can assess myself. We have to be careful there too, right? Some kids are harder on themselves. Oh man, I think I only got about a 69 because I wasn't always nice to my peers or something, It's tough. So if we have clear guidelines for that, I don't see any problem with that. And depending on what the class is, but we want to be careful to say that they're having difficulty getting together, so I'm going to say, okay, your behavior grade is just as important as, or it's going to carry the same weight on your grade. We have to be very careful. I don't know if I'm answering your question. There's nothing wrong with getting students into the habit of self-assessment and working collaboratively, but we have to be very careful that final grade measures what they know and are able to do.
I guess, would that assessment be more of a participation grade?
Certainly, it certainly can. And if you have participation, 20% of your score is participation, add that in. That sometimes is just to help some kids, but sometimes it's a very meaningful thing too. That participation is key. And then when you get to activities like that, certainly. So, yeah, I guess what we're saying is where it says here that explain how these will carry as much as academic performance for determining grades. You should never see on a syllabus 50% is your grade for your assessments and 50% is participation. Generally, you shouldn't see that. Maybe at college level where you have much more academic freedom, but in public schools, no. Yeah? Okay, and number 6, the teacher who has 4 different native languages going on in his classroom, what do you think, A, B, C, or D?
A.
It is A. Very good. Yeah, how did we do on that one? Any questions? Please ask about this one. Because some things kind of, I think you probably could get rid of C right away for that one, right? There's nothing wrong with testing students several times during the grading period, but then, so he does not have to give a unit test? No, that's wrong. What's wrong with B there? What's wrong with B?
There's too much freedom to the student.
Too much freedom. Can we allow for some self-assessment? Yes, but not just having them give their own grade. Absolutely. Okay?
Could that be a key factor there where it says allow students? And those 2 words are together means too much freedom for them?
Well, no, but because if it said allow students to determine how they were going to demonstrate, then it would be okay. But if it's just to allow them to determine the method, that's way too much. Am I answering your question?
Yeah, it's perfect.
Okay. Yeah? How do we feel about diversity? Are you all for it, or you're like, Gringo, go home? No? Okay, good. I'm glad. So then we'll move on to competency 3, instructional planning. Okay? So, use discussions for high order thinking. We've talked about the value of discussions in class. This is key. We must use the TEKS or the text to plan the amount of time to spend on a topic and the activities needed. So if there are 50 TEKS or texts that are in the chapter 29 for your Texas Administrative Code, you have 50 TEKS that you're teaching for the year, or that the state says. How many of those do you need to teach?
Whatever has mastery level.
So how many of the 50 do you need to teach?
50, 5 or 6.
No. 50. 50.
Well, yes, for 50.
Yeah, I know
Yes.
what you're saying.
Okay, yes.
There are
for 50,
supporting
but-
standards and
Yes.
so on. Yes, absolutely. But if they say there are 50 TEKS at this 9th grade biology level, you need to teach all 50. You need to cover all 50. Some you may put more weight on than others, absolutely.
Mastery section.
That's right, okay? And especially because of testing purposes, we tend to do that a little more naturally too. But if there are 50 TEKS, we must teach the 50 TEKS. We can't say, nah, we're not going to do 28 through 32. No, we have to teach them all, right? So therefore, at the beginning of the year, we need to look. We have 50 TEKS, we have 160 days, so that gives me about how much time per, but some I need to spend more time on than others. In other words, you have to plan how you're going to address all the TEKS, right? And all planning must begin with the TEKS. That is your basis. You've gone through Bloom's taxonomy, right? Right? I think I had asked that before, and you said yes. Right? So we have the lots and the hots. Do you know what I mean by the lots and the hots? What are the hots?
High order thinking.
Higher order thinking skills. So the lots would be the lower order thinking skills. Knowledge, comprehension, application. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful things, but they're not enough. We need to get to the higher order thinking skills, which are analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. Or in some places, we go into creation as well. But yes, this is the hierarchy. If you need more information about it, we can go into it. But if you're aware of what it is, please note that on the PPR, when we get to the higher order thinking skills, always better than just remaining at the lower skills. So when we get to analysis, synthesis, evaluation, much better than just the knowledge level, than just the comprehension or the application level. Now, if they don't have the application we can't really go to synthesis, right? It is hierarchical, but we don't want to stay there. Okay? The domains of learning, cognitive and affective. Cognitive deals with the brain and learning, right? Affective deals with our emotions and feelings, right? And psychomotor is more kinesthetic. The physical movement, either in sports, it should say, or the performing arts. So the cognitive deals with the brain, the affective deals with our emotions and our feelings, and the psychomotor deals with bodily movement. Again, you've gone through the lesson cycle many times, but just so you know, the state of Texas does expect somewhat that we follow this lesson cycle where we have our objective for the day, we give a focus to get students involved in the lesson. We always connect to their prior knowledge, and if they don't have a connection to it, we give them prior knowledge to it. We have appropriate materials. We model, we demonstrate, we instruct, then we have them, sometimes group practice, and then we get to independent practice, and then we assess. If they did not master, then we go into extension activities, right? And again, I know I'm going over that quickly, but are there any questions about the lesson cycle? When you plan the lesson cycle, what's the order? I mean, this is the order of how you present the lesson, right? But when you plan, is it the same order?
No.
What's the first thing you do? Maybe the objectives, goals, right? And then what?
The connection to prior knowledge. Oh, assessment, to see where they're at.
No, assessment. Now, I'm not saying how you present it. I'm saying when you're planning.
Oh,
The state says these are the TEKs. Okay, so here's my objective based on the TEK. Now, it says that they will learn, or they will name 5 significant figures from the Battle of the Alamo, right? How am I going to assess that they learn those 5 things? Now that I know the assessment, now, how am I going to get them focused in it? And when I do my modeling, I'm going to always be thinking how to help them succeed in the assessment. Does that make sense?
okay.
So again, this does come up sometimes on the assessment where the TEKs are the basis for everything. It's not what I like or what I want. You know, if I'm teaching high school biology and I say, well, I want to do chromosomes. I don't want to do chromosomes. I have to do chromosomes, right? That's part of the TEKs. Or, you know what, I'm in high school U.S. history. Well, yeah, I'm going to teach about the Roman Empire because I like it. No, that's not part of the TEKs for that grade or for that level. Does that make sense? So you must base everything on TEKs. But then how am I going to know if they got that objective? You do the assessment, and then all these other things are focused in on making sure that they learn. Any questions about competency 3 at this point? You know the drill. What are we going to do next?
Underline.
That's right. Underline, circle, cross out, and answer. Very good. Okay, so we're going into competency 3, instructional planning, 7, 8, and 9. Last time you guys were done within 5 minutes. What do you think?
1 minute.
1 minute. Oh man, this dude, he is Mr. Excellence, right? High expectation. I tell you what, I'll expect 1 minute from you, and from the rest of us, let's go, how about 6? Let's see if we can do it in 6. If we need another minute after 6, we'll do it. Okay? Go for it. It's 11:27. myself. It's been 4 minutes. Okay, it's been 6 minutes. Do we need another minute or so? Yes? Okay. If you have finished, continue to discuss with your partners to see if you have the same answer choices. Okay, let's see what we got. Okay, let's see what we have. And if I didn't do a good job of explaining a couple things, it's very possible I did not, and so I'll clarify here. But number 7, I think it is important for us to read the question. What is the question here?
For the most effective use of their time.
And I'm glad you started there. I think that's important. But go ahead.
For the most effective use of their time, what would be the most appropriate initial step to take as they begin plans for their unit?
Very good. So what's important there?
Most effective.
Most effective.
Plan.
Initial step.
Initial, I think, is crucial as well, because sometimes we'll look at these things and we'll say, well, these are good, but the first one, the initial one, is different than the other. So I think initial was important. Yeah. So maybe interdisciplinary units in 7th grade, maybe. Okay. But so what do you think? What's the best answer for this one? C. Very good. Did you get that one? C? Excellent. Wow. We know, again, we can't decide which ones are important or not. Okay, we're going to go with the interesting ones and forget about the non-interesting ones. We can't be doing that stuff. We have to teach all the TEKs and come up with our plan. Yes?
I chose C, but it was, for me, it was the hardest out of the 3, the 7. Like, I had to go back to it and reread it, and
Okay.
because it was kind of hard to choose which one.
Yeah, first of all, letter A should have said TEKs instead of TACs. Sorry about that. Maybe that confused you. And I should have probably mentioned that. But what's wrong with A?
The most interesting.
Focus on the most interesting. It doesn't say for whom. Later on it kind of says for whom. But this one, most interesting for whom? You know, for the principal when he's doing a walkthrough, for the students, for the teacher, for the department chair, for our president. You know, I mean, you focus on those. No, we need to look at all of them. Focus on, you know, the non-supporting standards, maybe, but no, focus. We have to focus on all of them. Okay, what about B?
I think when it says interesting activities,
Yeah,
that's a red flag.
yeah. I you know, and that's, I agree. You know, design a number of interesting activities. As a matter of fact, I don't really have a problem with this one, except that it's not the initial step. Very good. That's not the initial step. The initial step is to figure out how many I'm teaching, when I'm teaching them, how I'm putting them together. Now I'll come up with some interesting activities. And again, interesting is a subjective term, but definitely, I think the reason why this one is definitely incorrect, it could be because of interesting, it's because that's not the initial step. You don't come up with activities first, right? You come up with your objectives first. You look at your assessment, then you come up with activities that will lead them to it. And then what about D? Just no. Just, yeah, we don't, forget it, Myers. We're not going to go over that. You know, interest to the teacher so that students will be more interested or motivated? I don't know.
Spend the first few hours.
Right. There's nothing wrong with brainstorming and to take the time to brainstorm, but not to find out what's most interesting to me so that we can motivate the kids. So does that help looking at it that way? But yeah, it was, I could see why this was a little tough. But I would say especially between B and C maybe. But C is the better answer for the initial step. Number 8, why should Richard design his learning outcomes before he plans the instructional activities for his unit?
B.
I put B.
Yeah, I put B.
In other words, some
Okay, well, it looks like we have a major disagreement here. The better answer, yeah, A is out, right? Choosing their activities with limited focus on TEKs, no. So A is out. D is out. So it's between B and C. The better answer is?
B.
C. C.
So we're always looking into TEKs.
Yeah, remember TEKs are the basis for all of them. How many of the TEKs are we going to teach? All of them that we have to for our grade level. That is it. So really, you know, there's nothing wrong Yeah, you know, and maybe this is where I threw you off saying do your assessments kind of first, and I'm sorry, that's on me. So I would say it is between B and C, but why should he design his learning outcomes? It's to have confidence that he's doing all of them that he needs to do, and that he's devoting the appropriate amount of time. Yes.
During the test, you know how you're teaching us to eliminate and do all that? It's a, what do you call, computer? We won't be able to do any of that.
Correct. Yeah, and if I didn't mention this earlier, I'm sorry. I thought I had, or maybe I just had it in my mind. I'm getting old and senile. So maybe it was in my mind, and I'm thinking they better read my mind. But yes, I know, you're absolutely right. And this is more of a scaffolding activity where we're getting accustomed to doing it on paper, but eventually we won't be doing it on paper. But in our mind, hopefully, as we're taking the test, we can point out wrong ones right away. Say, we're eliminating A and C right now, maybe not with the actual physical piece of paper and pencil, but more in our mind. So we're doing it now kind of with the idea of doing it as a mental activity later. And again, that's why I say everybody's a little different. And if you don't feel comfortable doing this and you think it's not going to help me because it is on computer, please feel free to stop doing it at this point. And maybe by 6th or 7th one you want to see, can I do it without those things and just choose the right answer? That's fine. I just want us to get into the habit of focusing in on the question, focusing in on those key concepts within the scenario, within the question, so that we're not distracted by all that other stuff. Grade level, initial step, almost always, etc. You know, what is the problem? Those types of things. I want us to start focusing in on those so eventually we won't have to. When we're reading a book, we won't have to underline and circle and all that, but it will be in our mind's eye that those are the things we're focusing on. But you're absolutely right. And if you're feeling uncomfortable highlighting and underlining, at this point, feel free not to. I just wanted us to get into that habit of it. So, yeah, B doesn't look bad, but C is the better response. Does that make sense at this point? Okay, let's look at number 9. What challenge will this teacher face with this objective of students will appreciate the role of aesthetics in the study of history? There is a problem with that. So what is the problem? A, B, C, or D?
D.
Letter D. How can you assess, appreciate? Remember, and I think I mentioned this before, and this is where I say I did not do a good job here. When we do our objectives, they must be measurable. How are we going to know? Right? If we say students will learn, that's too broad. What do we mean by learn? What? You know, if we say they will name 5, that you can measure. Okay, name me 5. Students will write a complete sentence with appropriate punctuation. Okay, let me see that sentence. Let me see if it's appropriate, etc. But if we say they will learn, they will appreciate, you can't measure that.
And that's what threw me out, because I said appreciate is not measurable. How are you going to create other means of assessment must be employed? I mean, how do the teacher comes up with it, but we're following the TEKS, or, you know, kind of.
There's
And
no
so
knowledge outcome.
when we look at B, B is similar in a way, but D just gets to the point more. Yes?
There is no actual knowledge outcome from appreciating.
Yeah.
So that's what kind of threw me off, because the TEKS specified there's going to be some knowledge out of this, not, oh, I kind of liked it.
Right, exactly. And, you know, there is a definition of appreciate. Did anybody ever read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance? Oh, it's a classic, and it's an excellent book, and it gets into this whole thing of Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. It's just an excellent book, but it gets into this whole thing of how do we understand what good art is and all of this. while I was taking a trip on a cycle across the country. But, you're right. It's tough to define, and here, impossible. Students will appreciate. How can we measure that?
When doing our lesson plans, it's discouraged to use, right?
Bless you.
Appreciation of
Absolutely. I mean, there is, I believe, in the art, there is something about art appreciation. But then there are specific guidelines for what that means. And so, yes, we need to look at what the TEKs say, and then they will tell us what it is that the student is expected to learn. And we need to make sure that in our objective that it is measurable. So we would be following the TEKs. The overall idea of student appreciation of art, fine. Students will notice 5 lines on a Dali drawing. That might be it. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 80%. Right? Does that make sense? It has to be measurable. It has to be measurable. We can get to the idea of appreciation. Remember, I've used this example probably ad nauseum, but I always think of Texas history with the Battle of the Alamo. If we say students will learn about the Battle of the Alamo, how can you measure learn about? No. Students will identify 3 causes for Texans to fight for their independence. That, 1, 2, 3, there they are. No, this third one is not correct. First and second, fine. Then the next day, the student will identify 5 reasons the Mexicans thought it was worthwhile to defend its territory. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There, I got it. At the end, you can say they learned about the Battle of the Alamo, but for objective measure, it has to be measurable.
So
Yep.
you have to have clear, concise, specific.
Absolutely.
There can't be no speculation. Oh, I
Right.
think maybe it might mean this. Yeah.
And I will say, this has been, it's still ongoing where I'm at. And again, I'm the bilingual director, but they've given me a lot of freedom to talk about content objectives, language objectives. Language objectives are part of my purview as bilingual director, so I can expect that language objectives are up. And I didn't realize when I first came in to talk about, writing objectives. I would go into classrooms and they'd say, okay, I have my objective up. And it would say angles for math. That's not an objective, that's a theme. Maybe you're going to talk about angles, but an objective would be student will identify acute angles on 5 triangles. That's an objective. That's something you can say he got it or he didn't get it. Does that make sense? Student will draw 5 obtuse angles. Boy, there you go. That is something that's measurable. But just saying angles, that's the theme for the week, maybe that's not an objective. Okay, so did we do the third one? Yeah, that was the appreciation. Okay, let's go into 4. And I know we're coming up on lunch, but we'll get through 4, and then we'll do 5 through 13 in the afternoon. Okay, so competency 4, learning theory. And this will be a good place to end off because then later on we're going to get more into classroom culture and all that. Learning theory. Relate topics to their prior knowledge or to their interests. Always, 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 we could say you want to do that. And sometimes it's tough. Sometimes it's tough. But always find how they can make those connections. We've talked about this in the past. I'm sure you've talked about this in a lot of your classes, that we learn by making connections. I mean, conceptual connections and real live, like physical connections in our brains, our dendrites, right? So always relating it to their experiences and their interests. If they don't have the experience, we give them the experience. Encourage them taking ownership. Again, producing these independent learners. How can we do that? Not just by telling them, okay, you decide how you're going to get graded, but okay, we're going to be looking at explorers of the 14th century, pre-Columbus type of stuff. How could we give them ownership? By them choosing maybe how they or who they want to investigate, maybe deciding how they want to present the information, either in a paper, in a PowerPoint presentation, in a role-playing thing. We can give them ownership by allowing them some say in how they're going to do it. Use learning logs to foster metacognitive skills. What are learning logs? Very simple things, and they're very good if they're meaningful. At the end of each lesson or at the end of each day, what did you learn today? I learned this. Be detailed, give it, tell us. That's going to help them remember these things. And metacognitive, what is metacognitive again? Do you remember what metacognitive is? Thinking about your thinking. So this is where they develop their own strategies of how they learn. What did you learn today? How did you best learn that? Oh man, I learned it because I got up and I did movement with it. And you know what? Whenever we talk about this, I think I'm going to move with it. That's wonderful self-learning. Foster a sense of confidence by giving sufficient wait time and making expectations clear. What does that mean? And I know we talked about wait time before a little bit. Wait time is one of your terms here. What's wait time?
The time that you give students to answer.
We just did it right now, right? I said, what's wait time? Everybody, hopefully everybody, mostly everybody's thinking about it, trying to formulate a response, and then someone did. If I just said, what's wait time? Answer right now. You know, we're not giving them enough time to formulate, and other kids are like, forget it, I don't have to think about it anymore. So using that wait time when you ask questions, and always making expectations clear. We talked about constructivism, allowing them to build their own knowledge. Engaging instruction. When a teacher is excited about something, it comes through and kids do get excited. But if you're focusing on why it's important to them and not just to you, holy cow, that's when the kids are engaged. Because this is important to me. This is important in my life. We allow for them to express themselves, and we're making those connections always. Okay? We're saying it in different ways. Their needs and interests and to the real world. Always making those connections. Let's just kind of look at field independent and dependent, and then we'll look at multiple intelligences. I'm sure you've done a lot of multiple intelligences. But definitely, let's look at field dependent. And the whole purpose of this, don't feel like you need to remember exactly the difference between field dependent and field independent. But we do have to understand that different kids learn differently. And we need to identify their style of learning in order to address their needs appropriately, right? So field dependent students, they see the whole picture. They see the whole picture. They like working in groups because they like to see the big picture and how it fits into their world around them and with everybody else, right? It's tough for them to focus in on one aspect. So they're more synthesis rather than analysis, you might say, right? The field dependent. They see the patterns as a whole. So what do you think independent might be? Well, they see the patterns. They focus in on those. They're more analytical than synthetical. They prefer to work alone. They don't need other people to be helping them learn. They see what they need to do and they do it. They are more analytical. They have their own organizational style and they don't need anyone else to tell them how to do it. Now again, that doesn't mean we can't learn, right? Just like with multiple intelligences when we get to that. Just because they're strong in one area doesn't mean we can't help them to develop another area, right? But field independent are those kids who work very well in groups, they're very social. Field independent prefer to be working alone. So does that mean with field independent kids, we never have them work in cooperative groups? No, we can have them working in cooperative groups. Does that mean field dependent children, we only have them working in cooperative groups all the time? No, they can be working on their own at times too. We need to help develop those other areas, but we need to know what their strengths are so that we can get them there.
Never mind.
I'm sorry?
Never mind. You covered it.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that's the thing. I remember when multiple intelligences, Howard Gardner, right? And you've done this in class, right? I think you told me before you had. So we won't go into it a lot, but I remember the big criticism for a while, which was not his intention, I don't think, but the big criticism with a lot of things is you get kind of the main idea and you run with that and you think, okay, that's it. This is how the kid is. He's verbal linguistic, right? And so we just teach verbal linguistic. That wasn't his point. His point was, and what we need to understand from multiple intelligences is that we each have strengths. We need to work with those strengths, but we don't ignore those other intelligences, right? If a child is logical mathematical, and we only work with that logical mathematical, that kid's going to suffer with taking tests, reading tests. No, we know he's logical mathematical. How can we help develop the verbal linguistic? Right? Does that make sense? So again, I don't know if that's where you were going to go with this. Yeah, I think that is sometimes, and you were going to point it out. You don't have the misconception. You were going to point out the misconception that we think we identify their intelligence, right, or their style of learning, and we just do that. No, we identify it. We develop that, but we pull in those other ones to help them become more of a full person. So those are the multiple intelligences. I don't think you need to really know each one, but there might be something on there. And if you know it, great. If not, I can go back. But the verbal linguistic and the logical mathematical are the two that are highly valued in schools because we measure their success on assessments, and those are verbal linguistic and logical mathematical, right? We may have a visual spatial guy, and we need to help them get in there. So for the ELPS, remember what ELPS stands for? Very good. Wow. Yeah. Those shall be implemented as an integral part of each subject in the required curriculum. All content area teachers are required to implement the ELPS. Okay? Now that may be changing soon in the state of Texas, but before you take your test, it's going to be the same. That we need to know what our content area TEKs are, but we also need to know what those English language proficiency standards are and develop linguistic skills for our ELLs as we go along. Questions, comments about competency 4? Okay, I know it's just about 12, but we're going to give you time to do competency 4 here so that we have that done and we're not worrying about it while we're having our lunch. Oh man, I want to do that. Numbers 10, 11, and 12. Geez, maybe I better go back. Just forget my burger order and go back and do it. No, so that you can eat para que puedan saber bien la comida. Okay, so competency 4, learning theory. We have 10, 11, 12. We kind of did it in 6 minutes last time. Should we say 6 minutes again? Yes. Should we do it? Okay, 6 minutes, ready, go. We're about halfway there, 3 minutes. We're at 4 minutes. If you're finished with the first two, then you're right on track.
Yeah. Did you?
You got it? Hope so, think so. Okay, I may have cut it off about 30 seconds early, but it turned to 12:03, so let's see what we have, okay? And, wow, these are kind of tough. Okay. So number 10, what do these questions demonstrate about Barbara's understanding of learning principles?
D.
Letter D is correct. D. Okay, so A, students need to be challenged to figure out principles related to any activity. Well, you know, how do you think the historical figure? I don't think that's, it's okay to be challenged, but that doesn't talk about her. Students will perform better when they have an opportunity to work with peers to confirm their perceptions. Oh, confirming your perceptions, I don't know about that one right there. So C, the questions are, how do you think the historical figure responded to the event? If you were the historical figure, do you think you would have reacted the same way today, etc.? Why or why not? When you discuss the historical figure with a peer partner, how did your conversation help you to understand? So let's look at C. It is important to have students regulate their thinking whenever they are challenged to put themselves in the place of another, such as with a simulated journal entry. That doesn't sound bad, does it?
No.
Doesn't sound bad. Let's look at D, though. When students have an opportunity to actively engage, I like that, actively engage. Is that up there? Maybe not. We should probably put actively engage as a buzzword. Because, yeah, when they have the opportunity to actively engage in activities, are challenged to think in reflective ways. Here's the big cue or clue here. What does it say? Learning is reinforced. What are we there in schools for? Students to learn. So, yeah, I can see why C looks good. A doesn't look so bad, but D is the best response here because learning is reinforced. Not perceptions, but learning. Right? Okay, what about number 11?
D.
D, letter D, yes, okay. Why is D good? I mean, it's all there, man.
It's a student-teacher development.
Working with students,
Develop a rubric.
developing a rubric, evaluate the work, discussion, oh my gosh, it's all there.
It's the longest answer.
Huh?
It's the longest.
It's the longest answer. Yeah, that can be a clue sometimes.
So it's
But
either.
no, it's all there, those multiple activities to get there, right? Multiple activities to get there. This, yeah, D, I don't think it could be a better answer than that, right? Okay, and then what about 12? Sonia, she immigrated to the U.S. What does she have to keep in mind? What does the teacher have to keep in mind regarding
That
the
she keeps moving.
She keeps moving.
Yeah, it's normal for young children to revert to previous levels of success where they might feel a lack of security and belongingness. Letter D is the best answer. Comments, questions, or concerns about this one? You may have them, but you want to go to lunch, and that's driving you more than trying to figure out the answer. So, how did you do? Bravo. D, D, D. All right. Okay. So let me look at the clock. The official clock, which is generated. Okay, 12:06. We will start up at 1:06. 1:06. 1:06. We shall begin.
107.
1:06.
You took 30 seconds
It
off
just
work.
turned off, but you guys were on your way out before. At the 12:06 mark, you were on your way out, so we're trying to do that.